All right, ladies and gentlemen, so in this video, we are going to be diving on into step and piecewise functions with a higher focus on the step function itself. The goals of this video are to define what the step function is, what does the basic step function look like, and how do we solve some output values that involve a step function itself. And so let's take a look here. First and foremost, what is the step function? Well, you may have also heard it known as the greatest integer function as well. And it's kind of represented with these somewhat of a double bracket at some point. Sometimes you see it where it's like a double bracket, and sometimes you see it kind of where it's got this lip on the one side of the bracket that goes on with kind of like a little L frontwards and backwards to kind of resemble that absolute value type of deal a little bit. But again, the whole point of the step function is to understand that when you see an input value into said step function, and you see these either double brackets or the brackets that look as such, you want to think of it as the greatest integer less than or equal to x. Let's do that one more time. The greatest integer less than or equal to x. The first thing is you have to ask yourself, well, what actually is an integer? And hopefully we know that it's the whole numbers, both positive and negative, okay? And so let's take a look at how would we do some basic examples here. And so the question that I have to start some things on off with is just, what would be the step of -1? So again, what I have in parentheses is you're asking yourself, what is the greatest integer less than or equal to -1? Well, again, -1 itself is an integer, and the question is it greater than, or excuse me, is it less than or equal to -1? And it is. So -1 would actually be considered the value for the step function -1. Now the question for the second one, the step of -1/2. Once again, the greatest integer less than or equal to -1/2. Well, you got to ask yourself now is, what is said greatest integer less than or equal to? Well, once again, hopefully you know the greatest integer less than or equal to will be -1. All right, so what about 1/10? Once again, you're asking yourself, what is the greatest integer less than or equal to 1/10 in this case? So I challenge you, pause the video, see if you can figure it on out. Hopefully we know that the greatest integer less than 1/10 is just simply going to be 0. And then last but not least, what about in decimal form, the greatest integer less than or equal to 1.5? So let's think here. It has to be less than 1.5 or equal to 1.5, but 1.5 is not an integer, so the greatest integer less than or equal to will be 1. All right, so think about what that actually is representing here. Well, let's take a look at what our step function can kind of look like. So this is the parent function of our step function. This is the parent function itself. So the question that I have for you is, what's the domain and what is the range of the step function? All right, so I kind of challenge you once again, take a brief pause on the video and see if you can kind of come on up with what the domain and range of the step function is. So what do you think? What'd you come on up with? What's the domain going to be? Well, follow the graph as you kind of look at it here. As you continue to trace on down those x values, as you see, think about what's being happening in this particular example. All right, you're going to be reaching every single x value at some point or the other, even though that it's not continuous. You're going to continue to go and hit every single x value that you have on there. So we're going to have a negative infinity to infinity for our domain. But what about the range? Does the range hold true? Well, hopefully you see that it doesn't, right? What is it specifically running into every single time these horizontal steps that you see end up falling for an output value that is an integer. So the set of all integers is going to be the range in this case. Because, let me change colors to blue right here, all of this in between that you see every single time, you're missing all of those decimals or those fractions that you dive on in. And so instead, all we are going to end up seeing actually is the integer side of things itself. What about evaluating some more intense functions that involve the step function? So let's take a look. It says evaluate the step function at x equals -1, 2, and at 1.5. So we want to go ahead and evaluate f of -1. Well, that means the step, or the greatest integer, of less than or equal to -1. Well, think about it. What is the greatest integer less than or equal to -1? Well, it's -1. Plus 1 gives us a value of 0. What about for when we're evaluating at 2? F of 2. Once again, you're asking yourself, what is the greatest integer less than or equal to +2? Well, the greatest integer less than or equal to +2 is 2 itself. Plus 1 gives us a value of 3. And then last but not least, what about at 1.5? At 1.5, the step of 1.5, so we're asking ourselves, what is the greatest integer that is less than or equal to 1.5, or 3/2? And in this case, it is going to be just a little bit underneath at 1. So 1 plus 1 is a value of 2. All right, so hopefully that makes a little bit of sense as we start diving on into the step function itself. Give this one that you see down here at the bottom a check on your own and make sure that you do get this one correct. And let's take a look here. And we'll go over this first thing in the afternoon.